Welcome back to the news at 10. We'll be keeping our eye on developments in the various states that participated in the supplementary elections on Saturday. Joining us now our data consultant, Babajide Ogusowo, who has a wad of cash in hand. Babajide, before I ask you about that money, though, elections are still not completely over, as we understand. Isn't the focus taking its toll on governance?
It certainly is. And so in the last 3 months, we've seen a lot of focus on politics rather than governance. We've seen less focus on how do we create jobs. Right now that the elections are coming to an end, we need to put our primary focus on what the Constitution says, the security and welfare of the people. So there are 3 things we should focus on. What happens to businesses before and after elections? What happens to families? And what does the government do? And here's the evidence we've seen. Let's look at 2011, and let's start with families, for instance. In 2011, in the first half of the year, what we noticed was families spent more money in the first half of 2011 than they did in the second half. But in 2015, what we noticed was after the elections of President Buhari, families spent more money in the second half. So the question is, now why exactly? And will we see families spending more? Same thing, the government. In the second half of the year, in 2011 and 2015, both governments spent more money in the second half of 2011 and 2015. But the challenge is in 2015, after President Buhari's victory, businesses spent fewer money. So the concern we have today is all states and the president must focus on 2 things: building consumer confidence and building business confidence. And that is what the focus should be in the days ahead: building consumer confidence and building business confidence. Enough of the attention on politics, enough of all the violence. We now need to grow the economy, create jobs, and ensure that everyone is safe.
How do they build that confidence? I mean, because people are worried, and I'm sure businesses must have factored in the fact that there are elections this year. They had already factored in how their businesses will be like, the first or second quarter of the year and all that. So how does the government come in now to help quieten some storms and help build the confidence you're talking about?
Several things, but if there's one thing we should recommend, it should be keeping promises. Keeping promises. So all leaders, elected leaders, had made promises to the people, and those promises were not promises of violence. They were promises of prosperity. So we should ensure that leaders at all levels bring up all those promises and have a checklist to ensure those promises are kept. And indeed, civil society should ensure that leaders are held accountable to the promises they had made to people for their votes. But here's what we should ask ourselves. Yes, we've looked at the need to ensure that businesses spend more money in the second half, that families should spend more money, and indeed, the government should spend more money. But let's put this aside and let's consider this. If I ask you, are we in 2019 or are we in 1979? Now, you might easily say we're in 2019. But here's the fact. If we look at what happened 4 decades ago, 1979, the headlines are still the same. 3 things that had happened in 1979, 3 headlines. After the elections had happened, they had said it's a disaster. That was a major headline. The second major headline was low voter turnout. The same headlines we have today. The sad thing is, in 1979, there were cancelled elections. And then the INEC chairman, the INEC public speaker, the spokesperson of INEC then was Fedeko, Alade, had said that the problems with elections, one word, logistics. So the same concern, low voter turnout, cancelled votes. And what was the boogeyman in 1979? They blamed it on logistics. So here's the real concern. The problem isn't logistics. The problem is we are failing to learn from history. Yeah. And once we fail to learn from history, just as George Santana has said, we are doomed. Yeah. So the problem is we need to learn from history, and then we'll create more solutions.
What do the days ahead look like? There's a saying that you begin to prepare for the next elections as soon as the president's elections are over. So have we started preparing for 2023?
From the results we see, I think 2023 elections will be interesting, and that's what we see. We've seen in Borno State, for instance, the governorship winner in Borno State won by over 1 million votes. We've seen what's happened in Kano. The margin of victory between the winner and the runner-up in Kano was less than 10,000. And in Sokoto as well, we've seen a close margin of victory below 500. So what it all means is the race for 2023 is on. What is guaranteed is there'll be a PDP governor across all the 6 zones. What is guaranteed is we have APC governors across the 6 zones. So what we're going to most likely see is that 1.5 to 2 years into this results that have been released, the politics of 2023 will really ramp up. But again, the solutions to our problems is to learn from history. We can't keep repeating the mistakes we made 40 years ago.
Right.
Low voter turnout, elections that were cancelled, and blaming it on logistics. We need to learn from history.
Okay, since we're not talking about that money you have there, we'll talk about it after.
Oh yes, let's not forget business confidence, consumer confidence, and I see your confidence is high that you'll be going on with some of this.
Oh, Babajide, not tonight, not tonight.